Good morning and welcome to the BranchPattern webinar series. We're about to begin with our webinar, Exploring P3 Partnerships in Higher Education. I am Nicole Parker and I will be your moderator during today's webinar. For those of you who may not know, we are a building consultancy of engineers and scientists. Our name BranchPattern is inspired by the natural environment and how we use the natural environment to influence our design. Throughout our firm's history, our purpose has been improving life through better built environments. This is our mantra, and we use this message to influence everything that we do. Our beliefs are rooted in nature, which has taught us that true sustainability sits at the intersection of human experience and environmental stewardship. Today, you will hear from three presenters. First, I would like to start with our facilitator of today's webinar, Pete Jefferson. Pete, principal at BranchPattern, brings a whole systems perspective and a deep knowledge of ecological design to his project teams to achieve high performance buildings. He uses his background in mechanical engineering to look at the building as an integrated system, where climate, architecture, and systems must work harmoniously to yield the best outcomes for his clients and for the people who occupy the buildings. Over the last 19 years, Pete has continued to complete numerous high-performance buildings, including 7 LEED Platinum and net zero energy projects.
Thanks, Nicole. And I guess we need to update it because it's actually 20 years now as of last week. So had a 20th anniversary here at BranchPattern. So I was excited about that. But I am even more excited to introduce the presenters here today. As Nicole mentioned, I'm essentially going to facilitate a conversation today with two really amazing speakers. First up is Chad Beesom from Tetrad Property Group. So Chad is based in Omaha, Nebraska, and is the president of Tetrad. In that role, he provides executive leadership and sets the overall strategy for Tetrad efforts across its platform. Chad has over 25 years of project management and real estate development experience throughout the central United States. Throughout his career, he has worked for private clients, public institutions, and on a variety of complex projects, including commercial offices, educational facilities, research labs, hospitals, medical clinics, athletic complexes, arenas, convention centers, and hotels. Chad, I don't think there's any other project type that one can work on besides those, so I think you've checked them all, and is also a graduate of my alma mater, Go Big Red, University of Nebraska. So thanks for joining us, Chad.
You bet.
Next up is Jed Edeler from ZGF Architects. Jed draws on his diverse background in architecture, construction, and woodworking. That's not one we've normally heard before, Jed. Jed is a principal at ZGF Architects based in their Washington, D.C. office. He's a skilled designer, technical detailer, and project manager who applies a hands-on, engaged approach when leading project teams. Jed has managed and led projects including workplace design, government, higher education facilities, and with each project, Jed's inspired to exceed expectations by developing creative solutions that overcome perceived limitations and constraints. He's lived and worked in Washington, D.C., Seattle, and the Netherlands. And Jed, I was going to say hello and welcome to you in Dutch. Since you lived in the Netherlands, I had to look it up. It's welkomen and hallo. So I don't think
goedemorgen.
Made my job any easier there. So welkomen to the webinar. So we'll get right in, but I just want to say again, we're honored to have you both here today. I'm fortunate to have worked with you and your teams on projects and know that there's nobody better out there to share your experiences on P3. So for everybody else, you're sort of used to the deal here. As Nicole mentioned, this will qualify for continuing education units through AIA. We can report those, or you can self-report. We'll have a survey at the end, and you can let us know how you would like that done. So I don't want to take it for granted that everybody knows what P3 is. So I'm going to ask each of our panelists, and start with Chad here. Before we dive in, could you tell us in your own words what P3 is?
Sure. So for us here at Tetrad, our focus is a lot on the community. Whether we're working here in Omaha or somewhere here in the Midwestern states, we like to focus on that community and how we can help it grow, be a good partner. And otherwise, really the key word for us, and it sounds kind of cliche, but it is that partnership, whether it's working with a city, municipality, or another private partner within that community. We're looking to grow that relationship, not just for this project per se, but beyond and for the future.
Chad, is that just a follow-up question to that, is that a formal structure when you talk about these partnerships?
We try to keep it a pretty loose just because we know this P3 can mean so many different things in so many different places to different people. So for us, we focus very much on our client and who that client is, what his vision is, what he or her wants to accomplish with this potential project, whether it's a campus or another partner.
Yeah, great. And Jed, do you have anything you'd expand on that? Anything about what P3 is in your viewpoint?
Yeah, I mean, P3, I think, can really be what folks make of it. I think it's a great tool and a great lever that institutions can use to kind of maximize their financial resources, but it is somewhat of an open-ended or kind of open scripted tool that people can build into what their focus is that they want.
So I think I'm hearing from both of you, there's some flexibility into it. It's not necessarily a rigid, predefined framework then. Great. So since you're both seasoned pros here, we're going to actually kick things off with a little bit of a case study discussion. So Chad, you're going to be first up. I asked you in advance here to talk about a few of your notable projects. And first one up is, again, from our alma mater, so I think near and dear to both of our hearts here, the University of Nebraska Innovation Campus. So why don't you walk us through that? We have a couple images, some nice eye candy here to share with everybody.
You bet. So roughly 8 or 9 years ago, our principals began working with the university on this site, which is on the kind of the northeast part of town, back around where the Devaney is. You can kind of see in the backdrop there. Used to be the old state fairgrounds, and the university had purchased that land and wanted to figure out how to develop that area. So they created a master developer kind of selection process, which we submitted on and were successful in. So we work very closely with the board there for the campus, the Innovation Campus Development Board, and then also leadership, whether it be the president, the chancellor, and then also we're able to work with the different deans of the different colleges that we try to serve there. And so their vision for the campus is food, fuel, and water, and how can we grow that within the community, but also how can we support that with the university and with the different platforms that they have. So a lot of it's driven around sustainability and how we can better our environment. Some of the buildings, we've got 4 active buildings on campus right now. One is a food science building where they do everything from testing different types of cereals and coatings on cereals. We've got a large greenhouse there with some equipment there that comes from Germany. It's called the Lemnitech growing apparatus there, which is kind of a conveyor belt of lights and systems for different plants to be able to test. Very, very unique. There's only about 2 or 3 of them in the world. I think this is the first one in the United States, is out here. And then we've got some other office buildings and conference centers there. And our 5th building is being constructed right now, which is going to be a Nebraska branded hotel, which is kind of exciting for the group to be a place where we can hold some conferences here on campus, but also a place for game day, having that type of opportunity there, which we have on campus, but nothing specifically branded for the Huskers, which this will be. One of the unique things with there on campus is that we created a CRESP project where we actually take all wastewater. There's a creek and a water plant just adjacent to this campus, and we actually used wastewater and run it through a system to where we can regenerate that into heating and cooling for the different buildings. So there's already been a payback on campus for the roughly $14 million project that we started about 8 years ago. With these 4 or 5 buildings that we have online, the university is already seeing some payback for that. So it's a very unique opportunity there in Lincoln to be able to do that.
And I remember from my time there, we don't have a before image, but that was a really underutilized site, right? I mean, it was essentially only occupied a week or 2 every year during.
That's right. Yep. It was the old state fairgrounds. So basically for about a week and a half a year, that's where the state fair would be. So you would see some concerts, a lot of livestock showings, things like that. And then there was an old horse track that used to be there where they had live horse racing, but that was probably 15 years ago. So they did some simulcasting, but again, very underutilized. And I think the community recognized that this is a great opportunity and a place for UNL to be able to grow into.
Yeah, definitely a dramatic transformation for whenever we happen to make our trips back. So you've got another case study you're going to talk a little bit about too. We happen to be working together on one of the projects that you're doing with Colorado State University in Fort Collins. So why don't you take us through that?
You betcha. So about 5 or 6 years ago, there was a opportunity to submit on a master developer RFP for the the Colorado State University. They have the selection process was for two of their 3 campuses. There's a South Campus and a Foothills Campus where we're the master developer on. They also have like a downtown campus, which we do some consulting work for, but all of our work is focused on those 2 campuses. A lot of it is focused on their veterinarian college. The images that you'll see here with that is a new a research lab actually for horses is where a lot of the work is done there. So as you see a lot of the horse racing and all of the horses that everybody invests in, they will ship to this building where they actually have some surgical suites for horses, a lot of research labs for different types of animals where they do a lot of investigating on how we can better treat and take care of all the different animals, if you will, with that. But this building itself was focused on horses. We're also actually building another hospital there that will be the next step past just kind of taking your animal to a veterinarian if it needs something more specific. We're a hospital that we're going to be just completing there here in the spring. And then we also have a couple other research buildings more specific to some different animals out there. We're finishing a project here this fall. It's an insect lab where basically we will be doing kind of unique in this time and age with the virus and all, where they're actually going to be doing a lot of research on different types of bugs and viruses and things like that. So it's very unique on campus from that perspective. Again, have a lot of opportunity to work with the university administration, specific deans and colleges. So we're excited to be a part of that campus.
Yeah, I think that study of viruses is going to actually be a little bit of a theme here today. But I guess as a follow-up question for you, both Colorado State and University of Nebraska, you're talking about multiple buildings, long-term partnerships there. I guess in the past, I'd always thought about P3 as a single building, but in both cases, you're working with universities to really develop at a campus scale.
Right. So a lot of it, again, will go back to relationships for us. We have a very strong relationship both at those 2 colleges. And so for us, it'll always be about the next project. And we're excited to be a part of more of a campus growth than just that individual building. We've got a couple other higher educational partners around here that we look forward to growing that opportunity, not just being that help with that one specific building, but more so just to look at that vision that particular campus has and that college or university has. We love to be a part of that.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing that. I'm going to move to Jed now for your case study. So this is a project, of course, that's near and dear to our hearts too. We happen to be engaged and fortunate to be working with Jed's team on this. And so Jed, why don't you tell us a little bit about the 5051 Center project here in Pittsburgh?
Yeah, thank you, Pete. I guess I'll start by saying I have somewhat some rose-tinted glasses when it comes to P3 because of I think what I think is kind of a cherished opportunity to work on the renovation of the building in front of you, which is was built by Ford in 1915 as one of 30 regional assembly plants throughout the country. They would manufacture parts in Dearborn, Michigan, and send them regionally via train, and then do final assembly and sell them out the front door. So this project, I guess next, Pete, we'll clip through these pretty quickly. This project didn't start out as a P3. The property was transitioned to the University of Pittsburgh. ZGF completed a program study for them where we were putting in a cancer research facilities. For those of you who don't know, Pitt's kind of powerhouse, they are the 4th largest recipient of NIH funding in the US. So their research in all kind of endeavors is pretty robust. And as the project moved forward, the viability of the project really came into question. Even though they had the property, they had a program in place, it wasn't until a developer came in and made a kind of a partnership, a P3 partnership with kind of all the land structure, that the project suddenly came viable. So I think it's a great story for P3 and kind of making that this kind of older building kind of really be able to transform into what it is.
Yeah.
Next slide. So if we back up a little bit, overall, for those of you who don't know Pittsburgh, downtown is off to the left. It's where the Ohio River forms. Pitt is located in Oakland, which is a pretty significant feature in Pittsburgh. It's home to the University of Pittsburgh, a number of other universities, Cardinal University, Carnegie Mellon. So there's a pretty high level of energy in Oakland. This project is not located on campus. It is kind of being considered a little bit of an innovation district component. So it's located on the Baum Center corridor, which stretches out to kind of a more developing kind of vibrant neighborhood as it extends out to east. Next slide.
Jed, I was just going to point out, if you do know Pittsburgh, it's downtown, not downtown.
See, there you go. I'm a huge fan, but I'm certainly far from being native. So like all projects and all great projects, this one is kind of really driven by location. So 5051, you can see at the bottom of the screen, it's really proximal to what is one of the university's primary partners, which is UPMC, a significant healthcare provider in the Pittsburgh area. So it's located right across a busway, a former rail line from the UPMC Shadyside Hospital and the Hillman Cancer Center, which is a NCI accredited institution. So its proximity here cannot be understated. Pitt is essentially relocating a number of their departments that are focused on cancer research off of their main Oakland campus to essentially put like-minded scientists kind of co-located in this location. Next slide. Working through the, there's probably a whole bunch of advantages for the P3. The kind of highlights are on the screen on the image on the left. What looks like a construction trailer is actually the first of 24 prefabbed components that were part of a penthouse that's going to end up on the Ford building. This was really driven strictly by meeting the aggressive time frame for the project. It's super efficient. It's also very low in height. Rather than a 26-foot high penthouse, this is coming in around 18 feet. So it's meeting some kind of sightline objectives. What it doesn't do, it doesn't check the box of meeting all the university's capital planning requirements. So a big advantage of a P3 development is there's a little bit of flexibility in the delivery, that the developer is on board with the long-term maintenance aspect of the project, but they can bend the rules and have a little flexibility with implementation, and they're not kind of held completely to the university standards. In terms of, and sorry.
No, that was my fault. I accidentally moved forward on you.
No, I know I've got a lot of slides, so I'm probably, I wasn't sure if you were prompting me here. I'll kind of skip over the financial kind of leveraging, because that's, I think, is obviously an easy no-brainer for the P3 advantage. This project, I think a lot, like many other projects, has the benefit of the historic tax credits that come into play when the P3 is part of it. This building wasn't listed as a historic landmark. So one of the first efforts of the project, once it became a P3, was really to get it registered, and then to kind of start clipping through those requirements to really make those incentives viable. And that's a key part of how this project became from not viable to being implemented. And that can't be kind of overstated. it's also, I think, a poster child example of how that program is really making a big difference, not only for historic buildings, but kind of reinvigorating communities. Next slide. Again, this is a little bit some historic photos here. You can see on the left where trains actually entered in. A portion of the building, we refer to it as the crane shed. So parts would arrive via boxcar. They'd be lifted up into this crane shed, dropped on the floor. There'd be some kind of linear kind of fabrication before it was dropped, and eventually sold out the front door. Because of the tax credits, there was an emphasis on a little bit of a lighter hand, next slide, in developing the project. So that crane shed really became the heart of this building. Because of the NPX tax credits, there needed to be a little bit more representation of what that historic character was. And so that really has been transformed into a multi-purpose space that'll really be at the center of all the lab users for the building, but then also strengthening that connection with that existing partner of UPMC across the way. As you can see here, there's a number of shared lab and shared core labs in this building that are also anticipated to not only support the researchers in the building, but also efforts for the Hillman Cancer Center. Next slide. In plan, this building, I think, is somewhat functioning as a mini innovation center. Its proximity to its strong partner of UPMC really creates a center for both facilities. And as part of that, there's a big effort on providing a number of amenities that not only serve users, but the community and also Hillman. So there's a large multi-purpose room in the crane that we talked about, but there's a large auditorium as well. And there's an emphasis around the perimeter of the building in terms of retail amenities and cafes. Next slide. Somewhat different from obviously a building on a campus. P3 endeavor may lead a university off of campus. They may essentially expand their partnerships beyond the campus, and so they have to look at development a little bit differently than a strict campus-wide development. So looking at street front, next slide. But it's also an opportunity, I think, for the universities to start to engage the community and kind of become essentially a good neighbor by making sure that the kind of standard kind of mixed use items of kind of putting retail on the street to kind of draw not only partners, but community members into the building and have that engagement is a key part of the project. Next slide. And then an image of that central crane shed that's been transformed. We are 1 level up, 1.5 levels up from the original rail bed. But you can see these platforms on the right where those car parts were dropped on, being moved up. This really is intended to be the heart of this building, and not only the heart of the building, but this kind of larger understanding of a knowledge community. Next slide. Part of this knowledge community also includes providing ample space for new partners. So there's 100,000 square feet of lab-ready space that's not fit out to attract other industry partners, folks that want to be next to the university's research group that's in here, that want to be next to the Hillman Cancer Center, and to allow an opportunity for essentially that growth and that kind of synergy to develop. So that's a huge part of this opportunity as well. Next slide. I guess in summary, this P3 project, the easy part is that it's provided essentially 180,000 square feet of new research space for Pitt using the P3 method. It's got 100,000 square feet of new opportunities to establish partnerships outside of their current strong partners. But it also frees up a huge chunk of space in the heart of Oakland as these researchers move out of their labs into this new space so they can be next to like-minded scientists. And it provides this huge opportunity for Pitt to recruit new folks, give them lab-ready space in the heart of their campus, which is, I think, another great win for them.
Yeah, thanks, Jed. I mean, that's a great deep dive. And the project, this image is sort of a microcosm of Pittsburgh. There are no flat sites.
Yeah.
You entered the building in on the ground floor on one side, and you exit 3 levels down on the other.
Sure.
So there's no slopes or something you have to deal with. And I think your cross section did a nice job of showing the complexity too of the project. So thanks for the case study. So with that, we're going to roll into a little bit of Q&A here, and I do see some questions coming in, and feel free to continue to submit those. I think we'll probably accumulate some of those here and ask those towards the end. We'll have a nice, hopefully lengthy Q&A session with our presenters. So Chad, kind of first off, I'm going to direct one to you. We went through a couple P3 case studies where your firm was brought in, ZGF was brought in on another one. But why does P3 even exist? It has to solve some problems, and I'm guessing financial is part of that. And maybe I'm naive, but for a long time, I guess I just assumed universities had big endowments and donors that they could tap into to construct these buildings. So what's the reason these came around?
Sure. So for us, when we start to get to know our clients and our partners, one of the things that we always ask, and it may sound silly, but we'll ask them, what do you do best? What's your mission? And a lot of these groups, obviously in the higher education world, are, reaching to their students, teaching, research, all of those types of things. And what we're trying to help them understand is, from our perspective, it's not always in the university's best interest to own physical buildings and to invest capital in bricks and mortar. It's better for them, in our opinion, if you can find the right partnership, invest that into the students, into the campus, things like that. So for us, there is that equity gap that we try to fill and help with that. So very simply for us, it's just, what do you do best? How can we help you focus on that? And then we can be your partner that owns that the physical buildings, if you will, from that standpoint, and help be a partner there.
So in terms of project types that fit for P3, I had long heard about P3 being applied to student housing, and I couldn't think of a better contrast here than to pull up where I lived when I was at the University of Nebraska, in the Soviet-style bunkers there in the background. And of course, a few years after I leave, the university builds these nice new student life projects, because they're not called dorms anymore. But that's what I've seen a lot of with P3 applied on higher ed, is in the student housing sector. Is that the most common type, or are these other buildings like you guys have been talking about with labs, are those becoming more prevalent?
For us, and I would sure, and especially from Jed's example, is that once you understand what that curriculum is and what that program is and how you can help that university or that college, I think it's limitless. So we've done things from STEM buildings, research buildings, to hockey arenas, to construction education centers from that aspect of it. So I think we're only limited by our own thought process. I think as long as we have a good vision that we can be a part of for that campus, it is limitless.
Yeah, thanks. So Jed, I'm going to throw it back your way. You've got an interesting perspective as the architect, because your client varies quite a bit. It can be a developer like Chad, or it can be directly with the university. So I guess one of the questions I have is, what role, when you go through the P3 model, do you see the university playing in the project development? Are they hands-on, or are they hands-off?
Well, I think from our experience, they're equally hands-on. I think the P3 model allows the university to focus on maybe the things that they're really kind of engaged with. That's part of their mission, which is developing spaces that are benefiting their faculty and staff, and transition the kind of procurement and capital development over to someone who's more specialized into it. So in some ways, the effort is the same, you're just kind of parsing it out into two different entities.
Thanks. So Chad, I'm going to do a follow-up on this University of Nebraska Innovation Campus here. So I understand that this is actually the first P3 project that Tetrad developed. When we were chatting previously, you had mentioned that. It's a heck of a first project to do with P3, but I guess one of the questions I have is, as a developer, what was attractive or interesting to you about P3 as opposed to more of the traditional development path of just doing like spec office buildings, kind of what developers typically do. It's a different format. So I'm curious what got your group into that.
Sure. So a lot of our founding fathers have always been big backers of University of Nebraska-Lincoln. If you look at the engineering colleges and some of the construction management colleges that we have on campus, many of them are named after our founding fathers. So there's always been a relationship there. It's very important to our group. Obviously, one of our other founders, Zach Weger, played football there. So there's an intimate touch there that we have. So we've always wanted to be a part of that in some way, and seeing it, how we can help grow the community, not just campus, how we can be a part of Lincoln and grow on that. We wanted to bring the model this P3 model that we have of kind of finance, design, build, and operate, to whereas we can do any or all combinations of that, from managing the buildings after they're built to helping finance, provide equity, help put together the right model, if you will, for the university. And we use all kinds of different models for them. Some of these buildings we own 100%. Other buildings, there's some philanthropic backing behind them, just because there's some research that we had a donor that was right behind. So there's a lot of opportunities. And for us, there's not one size fits all. It's just so many different opportunities and ways we can try to fit this model around what that particular client is looking for. So it was a great opportunity for us, very selfish at being close, and we already have a lot of great relationships there. So it was a great fit.
So since it was your first project, I imagine there were definitely some lessons learned for your group. Would you mind sharing one or two?
Really the big one for this, with it being focused on food, fuel, and water, that's a very focused kind of place to be, which is great. And it's really helped grow the concept and the vision. But I think one thing we've learned, probably the biggest thing we've learned, is even with that focused vision, we want to be flexible so that we're able to adjust and pivot. If there's a great potential client that may not specifically fit within those exact three terms, but they still fit within another college, like the hotel, for example. There's a hospitality program at the University of Nebraska, and there's maybe a half a dozen to 8 different very focused hotel models around the country, where they have an actual hotel on campus and their hospitality group helps manage that. So it's very hands-on. That may not have fit into the original concept, but we're able to show the university how we can help grow that program. So being a little bit flexible, so that way we can fit within other programs that may not be within that original vision, but will help the campus and the university. Giving yourself that latitude was a big lesson learned for us.
I hadn't thought about that aspect of P3 with the flexibility and agility that you have as a developer to bring in new partners too, but that makes a lot of sense. In developing these, I'm going to throw one to you, Jed, here. I was thinking about all of the different places that we work as a firm, a number of different states, and each state is different and unique, and there are some real wonky laws on the books out there when it pertains to delivery methods. Anything from prohibiting design build to, here in Pennsylvania, we've got this Separations Act that exists for public buildings that is fairly complex, but requires that the owner have direct prime contracts with each of the major trades. So they would have a construction manager, a contract directly with the mechanical contractor, one directly with the electrical contractor. So I guess the question that I have is, does P3 work in all these formats? Is it better suited for one over the other in your mind?
It's a good question. I know Iowa has some similar interesting delivery components, and we've worked with both. We've delivered projects in those, but outside of the P3 realm. seems like, and the way I understand those is if dollars comes from public dollars are part of that, that's when those kind of limitations kick in. You know, some institutions, what they do is they parse out those dollars that kind of require those fundings, and they adhere to that kind of funding stream. And then they use other kind of endowments and financial resources and kind of maybe do something that's a little more flexible, like a P3. I'm not sure for certain that they can overlap, but I certainly see some challenges from checking all those kind of requirements that are outlined.
Yeah, Chad, I guess you've worked through these different models in multiple states. What are your thoughts about delivery methods related to P3?
Yep, no, very, very similar to Jed. I would say, obviously, the procurement piece of it, whether you're working with a municipality in a different state or a different university, is probably the biggest thing to navigate. Things as details as retainage. You know, we'll work in some states where it's very contractor focused, and you can't hold any retainage. To whereas you see some of the limitations you have here in Nebraska, where it is a lot more owner centric, where, you know, we're holding an X percentage throughout a certain, you know, part of the project. So there are some intimacies of that delivery process that you get to work through. I don't think any of them can be seen as not advantageous. It's just a matter of being able to navigate them, whether you have a local partner or you have a partner that come down there with you to kind of work through those in the different states.
Thank you. So kind of following this theme, cost, quality, and schedule, Jed, you know, in your bio, it talked about your detailed and project management skills. And, you know, I've seen you're the taskmaster on these projects and putting together schedules that are really at the heart of how the projects get delivered. So from your standpoint, I mean, what do you think about P3? Does it make a process go faster, slower, or the same?
Well, I think it does come back to, it can be whatever the kind of parties want it to be and are going to find beneficial. There's obviously benefits with projects being delivered quicker. I mean, escalation is it's often a big number that you have to overcome. So getting a project online sooner has some advantages. And at least in my experience for the P3, there is a drive for schedule. But there's also a lot of flexibility in the delivery method, in which GMPs can be taken at 50% CDs or sooner. So there's flexibilities in terms of how that happens. I think from our perspective, it ends up requiring us to be as nimble and as flexible as what's built into the agreement as well. So there can be phasing that happens, et cetera. So it's a different challenge, and it can be fun. Let's put it that way.
Well, I think I'm going to kind of continue on this theme, but I've heard a lot of good things about P3 from you both, and obviously being advocates, that makes sense. But devil's advocate for a moment here, is there a way to screw up a P3 project? I mean, are there pitfalls involved in P3? Some things that you have to look out for and avoid that are different from a normal project?
Yeah, certainly. I think there's opportunity to screw up most things, right?
Yeah.
I think our general approach is we kind of treat it as the same. I mean, the difference is there's probably two parties at the table instead of one. So there's that benefit of a few more voices, but that can also be a little bit challenging. I think it requires the team to stay focused. I think, as Chad was pointing out in his, having that food, fuel, water focus, I think helps keep the project oriented. I think ensuring that there's a long-term incentive to make the project maintenance and viable is a key part of it. Once that incentive comes out, suddenly the equation is much more about delivering a project kind of at the lowest cost rather than a long-term vision. And that's where I think the projects, maybe the dorm you lived in, I'm not sure, but that's where some of those limitations and kind of hard knocks, I think, have come from.
Yeah, the sister projects to that dorm project have already been torn down at the campus. So it's just a matter of time, I think, right, Chad?
That's right.
All right. Well, thanks for that. We're going to move on to our next theme here, and it's one that's really near and dear to us here at BranchPattern. That's sustainability. That's been sort of the common thread throughout our webinar series, which I think we're on our 12th now. Also, I think a common thread that brings the three of us here together too. So, of course, working at colleges and universities, they often have really ambitious sustainability goals, things like carbon reduction, LEED certification, waste management. I captured just a few of the things that we hear about from universities. The one in the bottom left, actually, I just read this week. Carnegie Mellon University was the first university to release their progress report on achieving the Sustainable Development Goals established by the UN. So kudos there if we have anybody from CMU on board. But I guess within the P3 format, and again, it's sort of a different relationship having a developer in the lead on it. If I'm a project manager or somebody in the administration at one of these universities, how do my goals align with P3? Is P3 make it more difficult, easier? Are they still valid? Can I still get what I want, essentially, is what I'm looking for when it comes to sustainability if I'm a university? And I guess I'll start with Jed on that. Do you have any thoughts about it?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, I think it's what people make it. So that can be written into the RFP. There's can be all sorts of nuances prescribed in the kind of contract between the parties. I think from at least from our perspective, there could be kind of the core shell and tenant model kind of that's built into it. So you can lose, and just as a lead example, you could use those two components. So the project overall has some aspirations, but then as the fit out happens, they have their own. So again, I think it's wide open in terms of meeting any of the kind of sustainable goals an institution has, as well as the goals that the individual developers have. And I think more and more, we are not seeing them in confrontation, but they're pretty much aligned. I don't think there's a lot of new developments that are going on that don't see the real benefits of it, of including sustainability as part of their key tenet.
Yeah. Well, and Chad, one of the programs up here, STARS from AIA, my understanding is Colorado State typically is the leader in the US in terms of their reporting there. So when you go into campus-wide development, presumably they still want to achieve all of those things that they set out to do with that program. Has that been your experience?
You know, it is, and Jed makes a lot of great points, no different than them. It's a matter of, we want to understand the goals for that university or for that building, for that campus. And for me, I look at it a little bit differently in that I want to give the opportunity for our clients to dream a little bit, see what those opportunities are, sustainability or otherwise. And then I feel like our job is more to kind of help develop that, help understand how that impacts the project, whether it be financially or schedule-wise, and then continue to educate our clients on that and let them make that decision. What's the right thing for them? And sometimes it's more sustainable, and sometimes there might be more of a program, but we want to be able to give our partners the opportunity to make that educated decision when it comes to everything, especially sustainability, because it is something that if you don't have that focus, it can be something that can kind of fall to the side. But as Jed mentioned, I see things a lot more in aligned nowadays than we have maybe, let's say, 5, 7, 8 years ago, for sure.
And Jed, back to you. One of the things I think about when I talk about ZGF Architects is the reputation that your firm has for these really super green projects. And one that has been in the news a lot, I think, over the last several years is the Stanford Central Energy Facility. I mean, we've had clients on the other side of the country point to this as a precedent project for sustainability on campuses. So it's a really neat one. And so you've got this perspective of doing these deep green projects. I guess, you know, in your experience with P3, have you seen an advantage to doing it that way? So I think from the last question, we established that it can still be done, but and the university goals can be met. But are there advantages to doing it through a P3 model that might actually even raise the bar?
I guess from a ZGS perspective, I mean, we approach each project kind of with this goal of kind of providing a well-crafted building that's enhancing user experience that has a focus on environmental stewardship. So regardless of the delivery method, if it's a design build, it's a small project or a big project, that's kind of our underlying kind of ambitions. I mean, we're obviously open to listen to what the client needs in terms of what their perspectives are, but our approach would probably be the same regardless if it was a P3 or some other opportunity. I know I kind of skirted around your question there a little bit, Pete. I think what the P3 allows potentially is a little bit more flexibility with the financial aspects that sometimes can put a break or limit on a client's ambitions, particularly smaller universities that don't maybe have some of that leverage or that feet under them, or to kind of find a project that can like get their campus or institution on board with a really kind of a sustainable, ambitious goal. Using a P3 potentially could leverage some capital in a way that they hadn't been able to use before with endowments. I'm speaking at the edge of kind of possibilities, but Chad would probably have better perspective on that for sure.
Yeah, any thoughts there, Chad? Because I mean, I've got, I guess one quick story on our part is not a higher ed, but a K-12 project. Actually, that's a pretty unusual way of, or unusual project type for doing a P3, but we had a developer leading a K-12 project, and their own sustainability values were able to really come to the forefront to where a project that was done 10 years ago is still the most sustainable building in that school district, which is a little bit sad because in 10 years time, you would hope that they, you know, especially with as much building that they're doing, that they do something better. But I think that developer who cared about those types of goals really set a high bar there. So Chad, I mean, is there anything you want to add on?
No, we've kind of touched on this. I know Jed said it a number of times and I have as well, is just being able to afford that university or that client the flexibility. I know there's a lot of goals and opportunities out there. So I think for us to be able to put together the best plan and identify how things impact cost-wise and schedule-wise can just help them make the best decisions for them. And I think everything and every group's going to be a little bit different, obviously, as we know. So giving them that chance to make that right decision, that's where we like to position ourselves. And we surround ourselves by good people that make good decisions, like a BranchPattern, and they can help us kind of work through things like net zero and sustainability and what are the best decisions for this particular spot, this particular location or building.
Yeah, so I'm gonna tack on to that net zero comment there. That'll probably make you a little nervous, Chad, here, but you know, we were in an interview with some of your team here within the last couple of years, and talking with the university client who has really ambitious sustainability goals, big commitments that they've made, and you know, your team, when asked about sustainability and helping the university hit those carbon neutrality goals, said that you could build, operate, and guarantee net zero energy performance for that building. Now, that's a building that was in the realm of technical possibility for doing net zero. So for anybody that's wondering, this isn't one of those, you know, a 90-story tower with a roof that doesn't have site for PV. This was one that is within the realm of technical feasibility. But I guess as a P3 developer, how are you able to make that type of commitment? And is it unique to P3?
I think what we like to believe kind of separates ourselves from some of at least our local partners is that P3 for us means we're investing our own money. We're investing the money of our founding fathers here that are big partners within this endeavor. And so as we do that, every building we design and build and operate is hyper focused on that sustainability element. You know, we're gonna have to replace this roof in 10 years because we made a bad decision to put a cheaper system on? Those are types of questions that we ask ourselves, whether it's our money or we take that to our clients outside, to whereas we treat it like it's our own money. So we're very confident as we design these types of elements in there. One, that we're always going to surround ourselves by great people that know all the ins and outs and how to do this very well, but also that it's very important for us to make all good decisions, even if it costs a little bit more money. So that way, this is something 5, 10, 20 years from now, we're all proud of and not feeling like we have to sink a bunch of extra capital in.
Yeah, I think you were subtly saying there would have been some pressure on us too to make.
There absolutely would have been, yes.
So moving on here, I want to kind of revisit this project as a proxy for this idea around existing buildings. And so, Jed, you've heard this term phrase before, but there's an old adage that the greenest building is the one that already exists. And of course, you shared a pretty remarkable historic P3 renovation here. So I'm kind of curious from your standpoint and thinking through existing buildings, is there something we need to be thinking about how P3 applies to existing buildings from a sustainability standpoint? I think at one point you'd mentioned embodied carbon and some of the kind of things that we're realizing in the industry that really matter. So I guess from your standpoint, how does this align with sustainability, existing buildings?
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, the reuse of this building and its kind of configuration wouldn't have happened without the kind of P3 leveraging that happened. And part of that story is the revitalization and renovation of this structure that we were able to get on the historic tax register. Not all projects are going to land or find a older building that's going to meet those requirements to bring those to fruition, but definitely the embedded carbon, I think, is a huge advantage. To get to the sustainable goals, we use kind of, I think, the standard set of tools to do it. I think there's not a lot. I mean, a big part of this project was really more kind of the technical challenge of the renovation.
Yeah, I think this theme though of embodied carbon, and that was the after image, the before image here. One of the things I think about is that building's been around for quite a while. It's been really underutilized for a long period of time. There, Chad, I think you have some ideas or thoughts about how these types of projects can be freed up, sort of unstickied to move forward there, because again, I think if we can do more with our existing building stock from a sustainability standpoint, that's one of the best things that we can be doing, is bringing these, a building like this that's 100 years old back to life and continue to use it for the next 50 years and beyond. So, Chad, I guess what have you learned about your ability through P3 to unsticky these projects and get them better utilized?
Sure. Just playing off of the points that you and Jed make, as opposed to when it comes to like sustainability and the historical elements, which are so important when we're dealing with precious commodities like this. We also kind of take a little bit different financial view of it, understanding that there's usually debt, stranded or otherwise, kind of on these buildings that have been around for a while. So we try to come up with some innovative ways, whether it's refinancing or how we renegotiate some leases, so that way we can free up some capital that we reinvest into kind of that TI to revitalize that space. And then in turn, when we reinvest that, we just make that specific building even more valuable for ourselves and for our clients from that aspect of it. So for us, we do sometimes take a little bit more of a financial look on see how we can kind of maneuver things and reinvest some of these funds back into the building and freshen it up.
Yeah, and my understanding is that there were some of those buildings at the Innovation Campus, I gather. Existing buildings. Absolutely.
If you look close enough, one of the first buildings that we did, which is right off of the street. We kept the exterior facade of this old, it was kind of a showing barn where they used to show livestock. And so we kept the exterior brick facade of that, filled in what were windows before with like a metal panel, but we kept that as some of that historical element. There was some of that prestige of being back on that campus. Now, I can say it wasn't a very financially feasible deal, because we end up investing a lot of money in there. As far as the brick wasn't very weather tight. So there's a lot of those things that we went after making that commitment for the campus and wanting to do that. There was a lot of things after the fact that you end up finding out we have to make some other decisions to make it even more sustainable and be able to last longer when some of these things have been around for as long as they have.
Well, and it seems like a way too to maybe pull project planning forward a bit. I think sometimes when I look at these master plans and I see these really underutilized or buildings that are in poor shape that need capital funds, and sometimes you'll look at those master plans and it's scheduled for 10 years out. It seems like this is a way where if there's an interest to do those projects sooner and I guess get them better utilized, it can pull it forward.
Yep, absolutely. No, I think those are all just great opportunities when it comes to trying to utilize these again, existing buildings the best we can. It seems like it's easy sometimes just to tear them down and start over, but I think just the way Jed's perspective is in his group, and I think we like to think that way. We want to give as much thought and keep those precious commodities as long as we can.
Yeah. Excellent. So with that, we will actually have an opportunity here to do some Q&A. We're right on time. We'll have about 15 minutes. And I'm going to reserve a couple minutes for some closing thoughts from you both. But first off, we've got a few questions that are rolling in. And so I'd encourage everybody that has an interest in having a question answered to go ahead and submit them. So the first one that came in is, and I think this is directed at you, Chad, but when the master selection occurred, and I think this was during your conversation around UNL Innovation Campus, when the master selection occurred, was your team already set, or was that decided depending upon buildings?
No, that's a great question. What we try to do is when we submit on these, we try to keep the team very limited, more focused on us, only because we want to bring in the right partners for the right buildings. Sometimes we've found when we've gone in with a full team of contractor and architect, and it is a campus, there are a lot of different opportunities in buildings. It's just not student housing or STEM or a hockey stadium. There are a lot of opportunities. So for us, we feel like we best serve the client when we're able to bring in our stable of good partners and put the right person on the right project.
Thank you. Next one up, again, you, Chad. In Tetrad's P3 case study of the University of Nebraska-Lincoln and Colorado State University, who owns and operates the property once it's completed? And this may relate to the conversation that we just had about your ability to guarantee net zero.
You bet. So the first 5 buildings that are up in University of Nebraska-Lincoln, we own and we operate. And we have one building that's up and operational currently at CSU. And again, we own and operate. But at CSU, the second building, the hospital that we're doing, there's a big philanthropic part of that. So we're just serving as the developer owner's rep, and we're going to operate that. So there's a lot of different models that we try to play. But as of right now, the buildings that we are on and up and operational, we do maintain that. We have a staff of a property management team that is on campus that we house, that are under our roof, that we help manage all those buildings.
Thanks. Jed, I've got one for you here that's sort of topical from reading in the news recently here. And it's about community engagement and the planning process. And sort of curious if you see the potential for a different perspective, or not perspective, but is it different, the community engagement process, when a project is being led by a developer versus a university? So in the 5051 Center project that you referenced, that's not on the physical campus of the university, it's off campus. So presumably there's some neighborhood engagement, community engagement in it. Did you pick up on anything being different about it being developer-led versus university-led?
Well, there was a concerted kind of partnership between actually the university and the developer for that community engagement. I wouldn't say either one of them led it. I think it was truly kind of a team effort. The community engagement part, I think, is a key one, particularly with larger universities that have campuses. P3 developments that happen off campus represents an opportunity for universities to engage their communities a little bit differently than they had before, and affords them the ability to maybe change perspectives, I think, with the community at large. I think campuses can somewhat be inward focused, and they have their mission and goals, and they can really do it, and there's room for improvement for, I think, for everyone, but I think that aspect is a key part of it, and was a key part of our project in terms of both of those partners kind of engaging in that process. So it's different, but it's only because there's both of them.
Yeah, well, it sounds like that's a strategic decision they made to go at it
Correct, yep.
jointly. And Chad, I'm curious from your viewpoint as well, does that sound like the right approach there, as opposed to just kind of going it your own as the developer?
You know, we're about partnerships and relationships. So absolutely, I would concur with what Jed said to the T. I mean, it's something where the flexibility, you can always kind of go at it that way. But for us, we found the most success when we are able to provide some leadership, but also follow that vision and that program, if you will, for those particular buildings or campuses.
Right. Well, we've got a couple more questions here. I think we've got a little bit of time. If anybody else wants to get some in, we might be able to take on a couple more. So one that comes in here is, please describe the executive team roles necessary for success. I'm not sure who that's directed at, if it's either of you. So maybe we'll start with Chad as the developer. And then Jed, if you have any added thoughts, go ahead at that point too. But yeah, let's start with you, Chad.
So for us, we'll start with kind of a financial team. So we've got a group of underwriters that we'll have kind of within our world to kind of help that element and help make some of those decisions, decide on what that framework is for the overall project to perform, things like that. Then we'll have kind of a project lead, project executive on our side that'll kind of help shepherd the teams, basically from the finance to also the project team. And then we'll have a project manager that is in the day-to-day weeds, running meetings, helping facilitate architect selection, contractor selection, and that coordination throughout the project. And then we also have a support group within ours, which includes legal, accounting, any other types of support that we need. So we kind of build these, we're a smaller, intimate group, to whereas we like to believe everybody's involved a little bit with everything. In that, I don't like anybody to be out on an island and feel like this project is theirs and all the project problems are theirs. We want to be problem solvers all together, but that's kind of the framework for us.
Well, and building on that, the same individual asked a follow-up question too. And it is, I assume the primary owner-developer agreement is critical to project success. Can you speak to the original agreement? And I think this came in again when you were sharing a couple of those case studies.
I mean, a lot of the framework of that ownership piece obviously is critical to our success, but it's also about understanding what those expectations are, not only from us and returns and what we're looking to for our partners or investments, but also understanding the expectations of that university or that client. What is their vision? What do we want to get out of this? And what can we help them achieve? So that to us is, the agreements are very focused kind of on aligning those expectations and making sure that we're all able to exceed those.
And another one on the financial side of things, so probably at you, Chad, is what are the most difficult aspects of securing the financial relationship for a P3 development?
Good question. For us, it'll go back to kind of our original investigation and kind of courtship of that client. We really want to understand, we don't do a lot of work with groups that are hustling in town, want to put up a 100,000 square foot building, and there's not a whole lot of history there. We're very focused on what that university or that client stands for, what they've been doing, what they've done, how they've been successful, how can we kind of fit into that vision, and how their ethics are, and do we align with that, and a lot of those types of things. So our focus is understanding that piece of it. And then I think from that community development and community engagement type of a piece that our founders are very focused on, if we can get comfortable with that, we want to be a part of their successes. So that makes a financial element a lot easier for us to make that decision.
Thank you. So I think that brings us right about to the point where I'm going to ask both of you to leave us with a closing thought or two, and encourage anybody that wants to reach out to either of you or me. I think they'll want to talk to you guys, but here's our contact info. So closing thoughts here. What do you both hope that people who attended today heard about P3? What do you hope that they leave here knowing about the P3 framework? And Jed, I will let you have the honors of being first up for this.
Sure, thank you. I think P3s can be what people want them to be. They are what fits for the institutions and fits for the developers. Kind of as Chad has pointed out, it's all about relations. So you have one already established, how can you tailor that to meet your needs? But, I think I could probably say it a half a dozen other ways, but that's really it. It is what you want it to be, and it has the ability to be tailored.
Yeah, thanks. And Chad?
For us, first I'll say thank you to you, Jeff, and Nicole and BranchPattern. This is a great platform to be able to get out there regardless of the topic. So I appreciate the opportunity to be a part of this. And I'll even speak for Jed on this, you can tell we have a lot of passion for this. This is something we enjoy doing. We get up every day, and it's exciting to be a part of that. And I'll go back to just one of the first statements that I made that we've echoed throughout this is it's just that partnership. It's more about how we can grow a relationship beyond just this building or even beyond just this campus. How can we help and be a better community member? And with that, we don't specifically invest a lot in marketing and business development. We're very strategic, and a lot of that is we want to focus on our clients and our good vendor partners like a BranchPattern on future opportunities and how those can grow. We look forward to that, and that's how we try to grow what we're doing, is just through those relationships and different partnerships that create those opportunities that we can work together on.
Well, I've enjoyed our partnerships, both of you. I've enjoyed this conversation. I've definitely learned something. I hope everybody else has as well. I'm inviting Nicole back in. Looks like you popped up on the screen here. I think you have a closing comment. But again, I would just say thank you to you both and for everybody attending, and turn it over to Nicole here for the wrap.
I will echo what Pete says. Thanks for joining us today, and thank you very much to Jed, Chad, and Pete. Otherwise, thank you again to everyone, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
All right. Thank you. Have a great week.